that we've all been dealing with here. Although, if you follow conservative media at all, you may have seen it frequently painted as the inevitable, dire consequences of a socialist government. For a case in point, just watch this InfoWars reporter quizzing an extremely chill Bernie Sanders supporter.
You know Venezuela, right?
Heard of it.
A majority of the country is currently eating rats, while their politicians are drinking champagne on a daily basis. Well, I'm saying, if Bernie Sanders were president, right, and he wanted to bring the same ideas as for socialism into this country, do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care, honey. I don't want, like...
Well...
Same thing Hugo Chavez.
Oh my God.
When he was taking power in Venezuela.
You people have, like, worms in your brain, honestly.
Now, as we mentioned last week, the bigger issue with Trump's sudden bombing of Syria is it runs directly counter to everything he'd said previously through tweets like, "What I am saying is stay out of Syria." But it turned out that was just a warm-up for a week full of foreign policy flip-flops.
President Trump making a number of stunning reversals as he faces multiple foreign policy crises after repeatedly calling NATO obsolete on the campaign trail.
NATO, in my opinion, is obsolete.
Now, Mr. Trump changing his tone.
I said it was obsolete. It's no longer obsolete.
It is incredibly annoying how long it took Donald Trump to reach a conclusion that everyone else had already reached. It's like a flat earther finally admitting the earth is round. Yes, you are finally right, but I'm still mad at you that you ever believed that shit in the first place. Now, we've talked before about Turkish President Recep Erdogan, the mustachioed strongman who once got hoof-punched in the dick by a horse. Well, he has been attempting to consolidate his power for years, and last Sunday, he took his boldest step yet.
President Erdogan declared victory yesterday in a referendum that gives him sweeping new powers.
His critics say this is a step towards dictatorship.
Oh, that's great. I guess I can now add Turkey to my list of things to worry about, along with America, the French election, and whether John Cena is having a happy 40th birthday today, and how the fuck John Cena and I are the exact same age. Oh, my God. That is heartbreaking. Wait, because stupid Watergate found a way to get even stupider. Because the surveillance Nunes was studying concerned the Trump transition team, of which one member was, yeah, you guessed it, Devon fucking Nunes. Which seems like a pretty clear conflict of interest. So it was important for Republicans to make clear just how independent he is from the White House. But they couldn't even do that properly.
You got to keep in mind who he works for. He works for the president. He answers to the president.
Does he, or does he work for the constituents of his district?
Well, you do both.
No, you absolutely do not. You do one of them and explicitly not the other. That's literally the whole point of Congress. But still, you can't argue that the notion that the CIA can listen to anyone in the world through their Samsung TV is scary. But, again, if you read the documents, you'll find this program applies to Samsung TVs from 2012 and 2013, and the malware was installed via USB. So, presumably, the CIA needed to physically stick that into your TV. And even if that happened, experts advise that there's still actually a potential way to circumvent it. It's a little complicated, so I'll walk you through it. Step one, unplug the TV, and that is it. End of steps. You're off the grid. But Trump is now also desperately trying to distance himself from Papadopoulos, calling him a low-level volunteer, which is a pretty weak defence, because not only did Trump once call him an excellent guy, they were photographed together in a national security meeting during the campaign. That photograph, interestingly, was released earlier this week when the seal on grand jury testimony was, I'm just kidding, Trump posted it to his Instagram last March. Of course he did. And while that photo looks pretty damning, the White House this week insisted that it meant nothing.
Sir, how can you describe Mr. Papadopoulos as having a limited role when there's a photograph of Mr. Papadopoulos sitting at a table with
the
then candidate Trump?
Thousands of photographs with millions of people, so.
Now, she is not actually wrong there. Trump has taken photos with many, many people. Here's one of him with O.J. Simpson. Here's one of Trump and Harvey Weinstein. Here he is with Grimace. So think about that. The president has smiled for photos with murderers, sexual predators, and in the case of Grimace, both. But Now, luckily, we somehow escaped Thursday alive, and on Friday, the president took off for a 9-day overseas trip. But the wheels of Air Force One had barely left the ground when this happened.
The New York Times now reporting that according to a White House document, President Trump in the Oval Office told Russian officials 10 days ago that James Comey, the FBI director, was a, quote, nut job.
Now, yeah, that sounds rough, but in Trump's defense, I can kind of see where he's coming from. I mean, the guy keeps hiding in my drapes. Who does that? He's huge. I can see him. Dressed like a tree. You've got to know that. And to be clear, those cuts will have massive impacts. Right now, Medicaid covers 20% of all Americans, 49% of births, 60% of children with disabilities, and 64% of all nursing home residents. So, unless you are a professional beach volleyball player with a vasectomy who is estranged from his family and who plans to jump into a volcano at age 35, you or someone you know desperately needs these services. Now, you may have heard some Republicans have come out against this bill in its current form. Some because it's too harsh, others because it is not harsh enough, and of course Ted Cruz is in that group. Of course he is. He's the only man in history whose personality somehow contracted bedbugs. But now, moving on to a quick update regarding New Zealand. Wallaby Fuck Island. Now, you may remember last week we talked about the historically stupid legal battle involving that country's ruling National Party being accused of ripping off the 8 Mile song Lose Yourself by Eminem, or as they call him in New Zealand, Eminem.
Mainstream media focused on the Trump campaign and allegations of collusion with the Russians. But what about the Democrats' possible ties to Moscow?
Former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn investigated for his private meeting with Russia, but what about Hillary Clinton?
The media wants to call into question the credibility and the trustworthiness of this administration. But what about Benghazi? What about the blatant lies that the Obama administration told us? What about the fact that Ben Rhodes bragged about lying to the media and the public about the Iran deal? What about the fact that Jonathan Gruber basically said the American people was stupid?
Okay, stop. Because here is the thing. None of the errors those people may have made in the past excuse the Trump administration's actions. A defense attorney could not stand up in court and say, maybe my client did murder those people, but I ask you this, what about Jeffrey Dahmer? What about Al Capone? What about the guy from The Silence of the Lambs? Arrest my case here, people. Arrest my case. In fact, this whole debate got so heated over the past few months, it even spilled over into Australian rugby's version of the Super Bowl.
An online petition is calling on the league to stop American rapper Macklemore from performing his gay rights song Same Love as part of Sunday's grand final entertainment.
OK, so that is putting me in a bit of a tough position, because I do support gay marriage, but I refuse to ever say, let Macklemore perform. His music belongs in one place and one place only, and that is the Pandora station. Now, that's what your mom calls rap music. But soon afterwards, he sent me a second letter, and inside there was a $1 bill, which was exciting, until I saw the inscription instructing me to send it back to him with your best prove God tithes or offering. That's right, I had to send the $1 back with an additional recommended offering of $37, which I did. So at this point, we're just 2 letters in, and already it's like having a pen pal who's in deep with some loan sharks. We allow for religious freedom in limited, sensible ways all the time. It's why Muslims can wear a hijab in their driver's license photo, and why devout Christians can't be forced to work on the Sabbath. But there are reasonable limits to it, and we've all heard it mistakenly cited in stories like this. Part of you goes to the reception. I have a horrifying sense what that might mean. In a way, I've been married 5,000 times. In another way, I come in the cake. And look, again, that's just one programme. There are many more designed for many different levels of need. And we, as a society, we have to figure out how to fund them. Not just because it makes fiscal sense, but because it would save lives. And if I remember rightly, there are some politicians who claim to be pretty motivated to address this problem.
This isn't guns. This is about really mental illness.
In many of these shootings, we have people who have mental disturbances.
Do we need to do a better job in mental health? You bet we do.
Okay, fine. Do it then. Because if we're going to constantly use mentally ill people to dodge conversations about gun control, then the very least we owe them is a fucking plan. Governor Dalrymple himself heads up the three-person industrial commission that oversees the majority of spills. And to give you a sense of the type of oversight they provide, last year, the New York Times found that one of the biggest oil producers in the area, Continental Resources, which had spilled 1.6 million gallons since 2006, had been fined only $222,000, which would be bad enough if those fines had not then been reduced down to just $20,000 because, and this is amazing, the Commission typically settles for about 10% of the assessed penalties. Oil companies in North Dakota pay for their mistakes the same way that 4-year-olds pay for their toys. Very rarely, and when they do, it's mostly just a symbolic gesture. Just give the man the dollar, Jason. Give him the dollar. I know it really costs $10. I just want him to feel like he's doing something. And Trudeau's opponents have used his lightweight reputation against him by running ads like these.
Is Justin ready?
Justin thinks budgets balance themselves.
But Justin hasn't thought that through.
Justin doesn't understand the consequences.
Justin, he's just not ready.
Now, repeatedly calling him Justin is actually very clever, because the more you say that name, the less ready for office he sounds. The name Justin doesn't convey leadership so much as it conveys an unwillingness to sit still at the paediatrician's office or ownership of a System of a Down tattoo halfway through a painful laser removal process. Those are the two types of Justin that exist, and just those two.
Political experts in Mississippi were stumped when the long-haul trucker who ran no campaign to speak of and who was essentially unknown outside his own home was elected as the Democratic nominee to be governor.
Spent how much in this race?
Maybe $50, $60.
$50, $60 on the whole campaign.
Right.
No signs in the yard, no bumper
signs,
stickers.
No anything.
Gray's run for the nomination was so low-key, he forgot to mention it to his own mother.
I called him and I said, Robert, you running for governor?
And I was like, no, he would have told us. And she's like, no, it's him.
Holy shit! There is a difference between running a low-key campaign and not having name recognition within your own family. And some states seem to even acknowledge how hard this process can be. Ohio actually has a list of job tips for ex-offenders with do's and don'ts, such as do be honest, but if you're asked why you left your last job, don't use negative words like went to jail. Instead, do use terms like relocated or contract ended. Both of these are true, and they are. And before you judge, that is not a lie. Everyone tries to present the most flattering image of themselves. You do it when you use a filter on an Instagram photo of yourself. Even the Queen does it, because this is her official portrait, but this is who she actually is. But deep down, she knows you can't put that face on money. So why haven't we gotten rid of the penny? Well, one reason, believe it or not, is that there is a penny lobby, and at the forefront is a terribly named group called Americans for Common Sense, whose spokesman has some pretty unconvincing arguments.
Americans overwhelmingly want to keep the penny, and no one has explained how we would replace the millions of dollars that are raised by charities and charity drives every year if we didn't have the penny around.
Wait, so his argument is no one would give to charity if they couldn't give something basically worthless, which is a pretty cynical view of humanity. I'll be honest, I don't think much of people, but even I have to believe they'd be willing to break out a fucking nickel. And the crazy thing is, while lead abatement is expensive, it's cost-effective. For instance, some studies show a correlation between decreasing lead levels and a fall in crime. And when you combine that with lower medical bills and greater economic activity, one study found that each dollar spent on lead paint hazard control would bring back at least $17 in societal benefits, which is great. Although the cost savings still do rank a distant third on my list of reasons to not poison children. Number 1 and 2 still being it's poison and they're fucking children. And this is clearly a moment where Puerto Rico could rightly cry out to its creditors for mercy. However, a lot of its creditors are now hedge funds who traditionally thrive on this kind of chaos.
Hedge funds often invest in debt-ridden economies, buying up bonds at low prices and looking to flip them for quick profits. And Puerto Rico is their latest target. The strategy has earned them a reputation among critics as so-called vulture funds.
It's true. As much as 30% of Puerto Rican debt is now held by vulture funds. And if you are alone in the desert and see vultures perched above you, your first thought is never, oh, thank God, the vultures are coming to help. And if you think I'm exaggerating about the impact that this misreporting can have on our faith in science, look at an example from some of the people most guilty of it. Because the Today Show, which lives for scientific studies, recently concluded one segment like this.
Like a lot of studies that we love around here, there have been a couple, especially related to women, about the benefits, as I get all serious, on whole milk. Hey, whole milk, but it's true.
Well, there's a lot of research, though, that says actually having whole milk or having whole fat dairy products actually can help you lose weight.
I think the way to live your life is you find the study that sounds best to you, and you go with that.
No! No, 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 no! In science, you don't just get to cherry-pick the parts that justify what you were going to do anyway. That's religion. You're thinking of religion. That is what you're thinking of there. And look, so look, we have an antiquated, disjointed system populated by workers who are understandably sick of listening to people's butts. And what makes this even more frustrating is that almost everyone's phone bill has a line like this on it, which you might assume goes directly to fund 911 centres. But the FCC's fee report showed that since 2008, at least 20 states have diverted those dollars elsewhere, which is probably why, depending on where you live, 911 may be a joke in your town, to quote Duran Duran. I mean, I know it's a Public Enemy song, but did you know that Duran Duran covered it?